And this is another opportunity to give a shout out to the first responders, the paramedics, the EMTs. What I want you to pay attention to in that footage is that the congressman obviously has had his shirt removed. That is standard procedure. When you have bleeding, uncontrolled bleeding, or something like a gunshot wound at the scene, the first premise of those responders is to expose the area to get control of that bleeding above the point of entry. So if you have a hip injury, obviously you would need to expose the lower abdomen, the chest. They have to inspect the patient to find out if there were other entry wounds or exit wounds. And, you know, first responders do not pass their credentialing exam without passing two very important premises. Is the scene safe? Do they have their gloves on? And we have to remember, put yourself in these first responders' shoes. They don't know that that scene is safe, and they are yet being called in to give emergency medical attention to someone who is assumed to be hemodynamically unstable, who's just suffered a gunshot wound. And if you look again at that footage of the congressman, he has nasal oxygen, he has IV lines taped to his arm, he has EKG monitors to his chest. This is extensive, you know, basic trauma medical procedure done in the field. We have to recognize the skill and fortitude and composure of these first responders.
You're right. When they go there, they don't know.
They have no idea. And in fact, it's so counterintuitive because any first responder, police officer, firefighter, paramedic, EMT, we go into those fields to want to help people, but yet you will fail your exam, your credentialing exam, if you go into an area that is not secured. And so they have to kind of make an assessment. The police in the area would tell them, this scene is not secure. You cannot go and help that patient, but yet you're seeing them do it. And also, we have to remember, to be clear, this is not something that many of them may have ever done before, but yet they are trained to execute it and do it in a calm, methodical fashion. They deserve a tremendous shout out.
And we're getting some information from one of the congressmen who was on the scene, who had served in Iraq, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, who helped treat Congressman Scalise. He said, I felt like I was back in Iraq, but without my weapon. And he describes what they were doing: compression on the wound, checking, and doing what they call a sweep.
Yeah, now that's interesting. That's the premise of our EMT or paramedic system, is we stabilize our patients in the field. In other parts of the world, they do what's called a load and roll. They just get that patient into an ambulance or a chopper and they get them to the hospital. So you've seen pretty extensive stabilization that was done at the scene. But for bleeding, 100%, and anyone listening can do this themselves, you put direct, firm, continuous pressure on a wound and you do not look.
Another important point he makes is hydration. He says the congressman was saying he was thirsty, although we see this is the Alexandria police chief. Let's go there quickly.
Be interviewed. Once we have more information, we will certainly pass on whatever information we can to make sure that you have the information you need for your work.
Thank you
very much. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to turn it back over to the Alexandria chief.
Thank you, Chief. We're not going to ask it, folks. We're not going to answer any questions at this point because this, as the chief pointed out, this is an active, ongoing investigation. We call the crime scene. We're not going to ask it, folks. We're not going to answer any questions. It's premature for us to respond any further. In an hour and a half, we will come back together and give you an update on what we can speak to, and perhaps answer some questions at that time.
Any indication of an ongoing shooting? Any other shooters out there?
This is a stable situation at this point. There's no additional threat. We consider this incident to be a closed incident under investigation. Thank you very much. We'll be back with you in about an hour and a half. Thank you.
A lot of information there from the police chief, calling it a stable situation, a closed situation, but an active investigation. Brad Garrett, former FBI special agent, what will they be doing next?
Well, George, the real key here is going to be what was something beyond the shooter? In other words, was there other activities? What was in his car? How did he get there? Did he travel with somebody else? I'm sure they've pulled a cell phone, but to see who is he talked to recently and looked at social media, because as you and I talked a few minutes ago, they must be 100% sure he's the only guy. And so that's still the immediate activity, and that's why I think both police chiefs wouldn't give any answers, because they still don't really know exactly what they have here other than a shooting scene.
Okay, Senator Jeff Flake is now joining us on the phone. Of course, Senator Flake was there at the scene at the baseball practice this morning. Senator Flake, we're glad you're okay. Early indications now also that Congressman Scalise is going to be okay. Some encouraging news there as well. Tell us what happened.
Well, we were having batting practice. I just batted, fielded, and was standing near the dugout talking to our manager, Joe Barton, Texas, and we heard a loud bang, and it sounded like a shot to us. But until the second one came, then the third, and then a rally, we weren't sure. And it was this pandemonium that you can imagine. He had a clear view of the field near the third base dugout and seemed to be firing indiscriminately. He had a rifle initially. I think he had handguns as well. He had a lot of ammo, I can tell you that. Steve Scalise was hit pretty early and dragged himself out into the field. Several of us dove into the first base dugout, and then the Capitol Police started returning fire from behind us. And I'm here.
So yeah, you were in the first base dugout. The shooter was behind the third base dugout.
Around that area, he was outside of the fence, and then he came around and behind home plate, and I got a look at him then. He had a clear view into our dugout. There were about 12 people in our dugout on the ground, and he had a clear view in, so we had to get back down. And this went on for 10 minutes at least, with dozens and dozens and dozens of rounds fired. I didn't know, we couldn't tell for a while if those behind us were friendly or if there was another shooter. And we didn't know if we should stay in the dugout. I wanted to get to Steve Scalise laying out there in the field, but while there were bullets flying overhead, I couldn't. And as soon as somebody yelled, "Shooters down," I spread it out to Steve, and he had a shot to the left hip and was bleeding quite a bit. So put pressure on that for a while until the medics arrived.
Could you get any, you said you saw the shooter, you said you thought he had a rifle and maybe some handguns as well. What else can you tell us about him? Size?
He looked to be in probably his 40s, dark hair and a blue shirt. We weren't looking too long. Obviously, he had clear sight to us, so we were trying to get down. And there were bullets, going whizzing around the whole time. So it was a horrible scene. A couple of Capitol policemen were shot as well. Those that were returning fire. The one was shot in the leg or by the ankle, and he kept returning fire. Can you hold for 1 second? 1 second.
Certainly. We're hearing also now from Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Of course, she was shot back in 2011. She says, "My heart is with my former colleagues, their families and staff in the U.S. Capitol Police, public servants and heroes today and every day." We do know the U.S. Capitol Police returned fire on that shooter. Senator Jeff Flake was just telling us the shooter is down. Alexandria police have just said it is a stable, closed situation at this point. Expect to come out with more details in the next hour and a half. Cecilia Vega on the scene for us at the White House.
George, we're told that the vice president is on his way here to the White House. He had an event scheduled that was supposed to be taking place right now. That event has been canceled. We know this White House is monitoring, obviously, this situation very closely. The vice president has sent out a tweet extending his thoughts and prayers to Steve Scalise. He says, "Karen, of course, his wife, and I are praying for Steve Scalise, the Capitol Police, and all hurt. They're praying for a speedy recovery. Our hearts are with them and their loved ones." That same sentiment, of course, came from President Trump earlier this morning. This is a very fluid situation, but George, as I just said, the vice president is now on his way here to the White House. Vice President on his way to the White House. We're hearing from the U.S. Capitol Police as well right now, confirming this incident and beefing up the police presence around the Capitol right now. We can expect that at the Capitol, Pierre, likely around Washington, D.C. today.
Exactly, George. They have to respond because of the potential for copycats. What you're going to see inside the Capitol, additional police, more dogs walking around, bomb-sniffing dogs even, and law enforcement officials are pointing to the fact that in this case, we have yet another example of a mass shooting situation involving a man with a long rifle. This is a distinctly American phenomenon that we see. The FBI putting out data that we average at least 16 mass shootings like this a year, one per month, a little bit more than one per month. Sometimes they don't make the headlines like this, but obviously law enforcement officials are responding, trying to get additional information out to their partners around the region. Sources are emphasizing, George, how the security detail that was with the congressman practicing this morning saved lives today.